It's time to sit back, relax, and listen to Conversations with Joan. Conversations with Joan will inspire, motivate, and empower you. Live your best life now. Listen, learn, think, and decide. And now, here's your host, Joan Herman.
Welcome to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life's Conversations with Joan. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in. Conversations with Joan focuses on topics that are important to your life, from health and wellness to professional development to personal well-being. Change makers join me to share their insights, tips, and strategies so you can thrive and live your best life now. Thank you for taking time for yourself, and thank you for letting us be a part of your life. Now, let's start talking. Today's guest, Kristine Carlson, says that it's possible to love your life after loss and major change. Kristine knows this because she's lived it. In 2006, after building the Don't Sweat the Small Stuff franchise with her husband, Dr. Richard Carlson, Kristine's perfect story took a tragic turn when Richard passed away unexpectedly. In a blink, Kristine's best friend and life partner was gone. Through that tragedy, she came to understand intimately how our losses are our defining moments, and that how we go through them shapes us. Kristine is a New York Times bestselling author, transformational speaker, and guide for people experiencing major life transitions. She's the author of the book, Heartbroken Open, a true story of coming alive again after profound loss. Welcome, Kristine. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Joan. Thank you so much for having me.
Kristine, I always love when you come on the show because your story, it's so inspiring because a lot of our followers, and you know my story as well, a lot of us have experienced different types of loss and pain and tragedy in our lives. And when we get to hear a story like yours, it offers so much hope for all of us. So for those who may not be familiar with your work or who may not have heard you on the show before, you had your life ripped apart by the loss of someone that you love. So tell us a little bit about Richard and what your relationship was like.
I met Richard when I was 18 years old and he was 20. We were in college. And we literally had that love at first sight or first meeting fairy tale story. I mean, we just really instantly knew that we were meant to be together, and we lived just about 25 years with a lot of incredible moments, a lot of incredible times together, and a high level of compatibility. So we really were best friends, and really all relationships to each other, best friends, lovers. We were work partners. We were parents. We had a great life. And midlife, I was 43, Richard was 45, took a sudden turn. And it was about 10 years into his best-selling book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. And we were very fully into building the brand of Don't Sweat the Small Stuff at that time. But at the 10th anniversary of Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, Richard got on a plane, and on the descent of a flight into New York, where he was going to do some media for his latest book, he had a pulmonary embolism on the descent of that flight, and it took his life immediately. And, it's one of those shocking stories that people have, and I'm no different than anyone else. There's so many people in the world that have had a similar story, and it when you get that phone call that's unexpected like that, it literally is like having the floor pulled out from underneath you. The rug is pulled out from under your feet. And I felt like that day that I heard the news of his death, I felt like I died too. I died with him. And in many ways, I've discovered whether you've gone through loss from divorce, from death, it feels that way because your life does take a different turn. And mine definitely took a different turn the day that he died.
How were you able to navigate losing your best friend and all that went with that relationship, and now finding yourself a single mother trying to figure out what the next move would be?
I think none of us know how we're going to respond to that kind of news until it happens to us. And something that Richard said often in his work to people was that the circumstances of life don't make or break you, but they rather reveal who you are. And I felt like a lot of the things that Richard had said came back to me as little instructions. And I sort of took a lot of these things that he said, and I heard him say them to me, even in my loss. And I think for myself, I am not somebody who's prone to victimhood. And I've always just stood in my circumstances and said, wow, I don't always like what life gives me, but I'm going to make the most out of what's here. And I didn't, and, initially, of course, I felt that it was unfair that Richard died so young. And initially, of course, I felt very scared. I, of course, had a lot of fear about how I was going to even take a breath without him. But I think I definitely knew that it probably wasn't an accident in our soul journey. And I, had lived a very spiritually rich life with Richard. We were early meditators. We'd sat at the feet of many gurus at ashrams. We had done a lot of personal development work and dove into our own psychology at a really young age for different reasons. And I think all of that work really paid great dividends for me in my ability to allow my loss to transform me and change me and awaken me to something better. And I like to say, it's true that there really is two paths. There's a path that will take you to a better life, and there's a path that will take you to bitterness. And there isn't a lot of gray space in between for a lot of people. So if you can choose the path that does not make you a victim of your circumstances, but rather allows you to do your grief, to grieve properly, to feel your feelings, and to keep stepping into life every single day, then you'll be on a path to a better life at some point. And that's not to say that the path of grief is an easy one. It's not. It's wrought with sorrow and pain and dark corners, and you have to really search out what is light for you, search out your support, not isolate yourself in grief. I mean, so many people might think that isolation is the way to go, but it actually really can be quite harmful to isolate yourself too long in grief. So, looking for support, looking for light, trying to stay inspired, and just following the breadcrumbs each day of how do you get out of bed? How do you look for what there is in life that's going to keep you looking for more life? And, there's a time of survival. There really is. I've been helping a lot of people in grief lately, and I know not to say too much about being too far down the path too early, because there is a time that we are very wounded and very, very grief-stricken and stricken down. And during those times, it's not really that comforting for somebody to think of their future. It's more comforting to just go through where they are in the moment. And if you can hold space for somebody in the moment and allow them to be where they are without trying to fix them, that's oftentimes the most helpful thing you can do for somebody in grief.
Yeah. I like when you say we don't sweat the small stuff when we're living the big stuff, because what I've learned to do over the past few years is when I start to get upset about something or feel pain about something, I say to myself, if I were sick or if something really bad happened, would I care about this thing that's upsetting me so much? And I've learned that most of the things that I get upset about really don't matter.
Yeah, that's so true. And that's a great way to get your perspective back is to ask yourself questions like that. That's so healthy, Jen.
You and I are, I like to say, on the other side. I mean, you're always going through it's a process, but when you do come out on the other side, you see those moments where you could have gone in that one direction you talked about and stayed in that pain, but making that decision to go the other way, it's a hard one, but that's where you end up with so many beautiful things. There really are wonderful things that can come out of the ashes of pain. I'm not saying that we want them at the time, we don't wish the pain, but there really are wonderful things.
We don't want them delivered, in that way. We definitely don't want them delivered in that way.
But, I kind of say to myself now, if I'm in this situation, I might as well look for the blessings because I'm here. So this is the choice. I can look for the blessings or I can stay in the pain.
Yeah, I love something my dear friend Karen Salmonson says. She said that when you look for the lesson and then you get the blessing.
Yeah. Well, you were saying, Kristine, that you lived a spiritual life. And when you went through all of this pain, was everything that you practiced available to you right there? Or did you find yourself in all of that grief and kind of stuck?
I can't say that I was ever stuck in grief. I felt like grief was something that was undeniable, and that the only moments I felt like maybe I wasn't grieving enough was when my stomach would hurt, and that would tell me that, I need to cry more. I started making that correlation because I would get a really bad stomach ache, and then I would cry really hard, and the stomach ache would go away, and I would say, there's my body teaching me how to grieve and rewarding me for doing it right. And so I would just let myself be in the present moment, but also let myself feel all the feelings of just, everything you go through, from feeling terrified at your future to incredibly angry and sad, and just so sad and so longing for that person that you love, longing to talk with them and laugh with them and brush your teeth and have toothpaste flopped all over your face with them,
Kristine, what you're describing right now was really the biggest thing that I know I had to release. It was all those supposed to be's, the way everything was supposed to be, the way you envision your life. You envision that toothpaste there. It was supposed to be there. And until you could let go of that, it's really hard to move forward.
Yeah, I mean, I find that is the key for all people is they're reconciling, the loss of a dream, the loss of their future, the loss of how they thought it would be. And when you can finally stand at the edge of the moment, of this moment, and say, I don't see what my future is, but, oh man, I'm so glad to be alive, then you've healed.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to when you and I first spoke today. I remember saying to you, wow, you've had such a monumental year. And if you look back at all that you've gone through, would you have ever believed that you're where you are right now? Did you see this for yourself?
I didn't know what my future was. I really didn't. I mean, I had cues. I had sort of hints along the way that this was going to be my future. I mean, immediately after Richard died, people started asking me to speak, and I was really asked to, take over the brand. I was asked to, do lots of responsibilities for Richard. And while I wasn't really that capable the first 2 years, I did kind of see that this was probably where I was headed, but I didn't know how it was going to come about. And I really just started writing from my heart and just speaking from my heart. I didn't really plan anything. I never planned to write a book. I was asked to write a book, so I did. And then I wrote another book because I felt like that was somehow going to complete me in the whole grief world, but it really didn't. I think that once you've entered into this path, it's your dharma. You become this servant of God and this servant of the divine, and it becomes your dharma to actually help other people out of their suffering. And I know one of the things that people come to me for, which I never charge for, is initial, conversation about how to grieve. And when I talk with anybody, I really my initial thing is just to try and connect them to their spirituality and to spirit, and to give them a few sort of, pointers on how to do this life with grief. And then they're on their own. And I think people grieve naturally if they just allow grief to come. If you suppress it, then it's going to have its day. Just talked to a young woman who I'm very close to. Her mother was one of my dearest, closest friends from my whole life. I knew her since I was 14 years old. Somebody I just looked up to and admired, a beautiful, gorgeous, graceful, wise woman, my age, 1 year older, and she died of cancer last year. And her daughter is my goddaughter. And I was so surprised I hadn't heard from her. And finally yesterday was the first anniversary, and I was on a call with somebody, and I saw her name on my phone, and I said, I'm sorry, I have to go. And I picked up the phone, and she was gasping for air. And I said, oh my God, I've been waiting for this call. And I knew that she just couldn't do it yet. Like it's not as if she wasn't grieving, but she hadn't had that deep primal, I can't live without her moment yet. And she had it yesterday. And I'm hoping that's the beginning of a real opening for her to allow her grief to come. If you can come out of one very, very horrible wave like that, and the fact that she actually did pick up the phone and call for help was a really good sign. And you can learn to come out of every wave like that. And I think that's the fear that people have, is they're going to drown in their own grief, which when you lose somebody that you love that much, definitely feels that way sometimes.
Kristine, what do you say to someone who's navigating grief, but it's been some time now? You know, you just shared a story that's a year out from the loss. I look at my life. I'm 12 years out now from my mom, sister, and husband, all of that loss. And, you know, some days I'm fine, you know, more often than not now, but I can be walking down a supermarket aisle and see a box of cereal and start to cry. So what do you say to someone when they say something like, I should be better now?
Well, I mean, honestly, Joan, I think that as a culture, we've done a really poor job of making it safe for people to grieve. You know, I think as a culture, we've told people that initially that first time period, you busy yourself out of it and you just try not to think about it and you shove it aside. And I really feel like grief is something we have to own. And the way I talk about it is that grief isn't the enemy. A lot of people in the grief world really hate grieving. I mean, they really do. I have many friends in the grief world, and they just hate grief. And I always say, well, you know what? Grief is actually a friend. Grief has come to heal you. And that's the way, if you embrace grief in that way, that this is a temporary situation, that this is these emotional responses that you're having are not depression. These are responses that you're having because you're grieving, because you loved deeply, and you're attached, and you have to find your way to that spirit that is, you know, was a person that you knew that is now a spirit, so that you can feel the sense of them and that continued relationship. This is incredibly helpful for people, and it's hard for people who aren't open to it. They're the hardest people. They go through the worst because they're not open to really understanding that their person is not a human anymore, but they're still a spirit. They're still the essence of who they are will exist for eternity. And it's up to you as the human being to invite their spirit to be with you and to acknowledge the signs that they give you, and just the warmth and the love that's present when they're present and you're present to it.
You had said that you always offer some grief tips to help people navigate a loss. If you could kind of sum it up and give your best advice right now, what would that be?
Well, the first thing I would say, and I always say, is that, you know, life is different now. It's not too unlike if you sat down at your doctor's office and they said, look, you have an illness and you're going to get over this illness, but you're not going to feel very good while you're going through it. And you're going to have to make space to take care of yourself. You're going to have to make space to bring a life around this illness, live your life with it, because that's essentially what grief is. Grief is not an illness. Grief is an emotional response to loss, but it is temporary, and it has come, and it is a part of your world and life now. And, you know, we're different after we've gone through loss than we were the day before. We're very different. And you probably never go back to your life living life the way you did. You're going to live life differently. And grief is going to teach you how to feel very deeply. Grief is going to teach you compassion, self-compassion. It's going to teach you a lot, but you have to make space for it. That's the first thing. You have to make space for it, and you have to take care of yourself with kid gloves. You really, really have to acknowledge what you're feeling when you're feeling it. And that means that maybe you have a dental appointment on Wednesday at 10 o'clock, and Wednesday at 9:30 comes, and you are in grief, and you're having a wave, and you call your dentist up and you say, I'm sorry, I cannot make my dental appointment at 10 o'clock because I'm grieving and I'm in grief right now. And that's the kind of thing that you have to make way for, because you don't know when grief is going to hit you. Now, 12 years later is different than 3 months out. You know, like 3 months out, you might be in the grocery store and start crying and not be able to breathe.
Right.
And 12 years later, you're going to be in the grocery store, and yes, you might start getting weepy, but it's a softer, gentler form of grief. And so initially, you have to really make space for grief, and you have to make space for allowing yourself those moments. And I was telling my goddaughter yesterday, I was saying, you know, this is good what you're doing. I know it feels terrible, but this is good, because every time you do this, you're like a faucet that's emptying out this grief from your body, from your soul, and you're cleansing and you're emptying. And then, you know, you're going to feel better. You may feel exhausted, but you'll feel better. You'll feel peaceful. And this is something that may happen more often now that you've opened up the channel, you know, and it's an emptying process. You're emptying out so that you're carving out a place, an empty reservoir, to fill it with more life. And that's essentially what's happening, I believe, in the grief process. We're letting go. We're letting go of our loved one in the human way, and we're making way for more life. And I love what Kahlil Gibran says. There's this, my favorite quote of all time is that our greatest joy is our sorrow unmasked. So as you cry and scream and holler and shout and cry your tears and go through your sorrow, joy will come. You're carving out a place in your heart for more joy. And you're expanding your heart to more love and to more love and a better life.
Yeah, that's such great advice, Kristine, because so many people are afraid to feel those feelings, and they try to stuff them and suppress them, and they never really deal with them, and they never carve out that space.
Yeah, that's so true. And I just really believe that from my own past, you know, I know, and from leading many, many people through grief and their suffering, I know that this is the way to health. This is the way back to joy. I just saw a widow that I helped years and years and years ago. Her husband her husband was outside, and his dog got up on the train tracks that were behind her house, and he saved his dog from being hit by the train, but he got hit himself. And she came to one of my my women's grief circles, and I mean, she was a real, you know, understandably a real mess. And I just saw her yesterday. It's been many years, and she just full of radiant joy, just, you know, just totally radiant joy. And I'm always so happy when I see that, because I know that people fully recover from horrible loss and from shocking loss. And the thing that they all do that is really powerful is they allow themselves the time and space to grieve.
And that's a great place to leave this conversation, because when you are in grief. You don't see that type of future for yourself. You don't think you'll ever experience radiant joy. So if you would like to get a copy of Kristine's book, Heartbroken Open, A True Story of Coming Alive Again After Profound Loss, you can visit KristineCarlson.com. Kristine, in about 30 seconds or less, what's the final word? What would you like to leave our listeners with?
Well, I just like to say that sometimes our greatest sorrow can move us forward in life so that our lives have greater meaning. And that, again, just to reiterate that loss is a part of this human experience, just like joy and all the great things that we get to experience are a part of it. And the more that you can embrace change, the more that you can embrace the things that you might want to change, the better you'll be and the less suffering that you'll have. And just remember, it's a journey. It's a journey. It's a process of discovery. It's a process of healing. And I just want to thank you, Joan, for having me on and for sharing with you today.
Thank you so much for being here. I look forward to you coming back on. I wish we had more time because there's so much that I would like to cover with you. So we will definitely get you back on the show.
Thanks, Joan.
Thank you for joining us. I hope you found the show informative. At Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life, we believe that knowledge is power. Take what you've learned, apply it, and live your best life now. Remember that the information provided is the opinion of our guest and should never replace the advice of a professional who knows your personal situation. If you'd like more information, visit our website, cyacyl.com. That stands for Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. While on our site, listen to past shows on demand, read the digital magazine, sign up for our mailing list, and be sure to follow the show on social media. Until next time, this is Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in.